Recently I discovered this bar 10 in the parts bin in various bits. We gave up on it a couple of years ago and it got relegated to the boneyard. However, I can't stand it when an airsoft gun's just sitting there in bits not getting used, so I thought it'd be about time that we refurbish this thing. The problem is though, is this thing is completely knackered and it would need an awful lot of money chucking at it to get it to work as a spring rifle. I mean, the trigger box, the cylinder, pistons, spring guide, everything, it would have to be changed. It just wouldn't be able to handle it. So rather than piddling around with spring power, which in this gun would require the changing of basically every single component in the receiver, we decided to go down the HPA route. And this also gave me an excuse to have a go at designing something I've had on my mind for ages. The Sabre is a 3D printable AIRSOFT HPA conversion kit for the VSR-10, and I am planning on doing some other designs for other variants of airsoft sniper rifles. And like the Wolverine bolt, this runs off a battery pack, in this case an 11.1 volt LiPo, and because of that there is no spring to cock back when you pull the bolt, so it's nice and easy to cock. And that's all the stroke that there needs to be. And there is no piston, no spring guide, no sears, no mainspring, nothing to wear out. The only thing under pressure is the valve in the stock. The Sabre engine consists of a small module that sits inside the cylinder, and you can use any cylinder head you like with this. You don't have to switch out your cylinder head. You can chuck in any cylinder head that you wish with any nozzle. In fact, I've tested this with one of those Airsoft Pro AEG hop unit conversion kits for the Bar 10. And it works perfectly fine. However, right now this rifle uses a aftermarket but more traditional VSR-10 nozzle. And on the bottom of the stock here we have our air intake, which is a 4mm airbrush fitting, which matches up perfectly with the Mancraft 4mm micro fittings that we have here. I do want to test this with a 6mm airline though, because this airline seems to be quite restrictive of flow, so it'd be interesting to see how it works with a much larger airline, which would have a better flow rate. And then if we take the butt plate of the stock off, we can access our battery, which is an 11.1 volt LiPo as mentioned before. Now this battery here is a bit overkill. It needs to be 11.1 volts, but it does not need to be that large in capacity because this thing barely draws a couple of amps when you fire it. But I'm just using the batteries I've got laying around. And inside the stock we also have a little solenoid valve, and then we have a ridiculously simple little interrupter circuit here. The interrupter circuit just limits how long the valve is open for. Technically you don't even need the interrupter circuit, you can just switch the valve with the trigger, but it's a good way of saving air. The interrupter circuit literally only has 4 components to it. There is no coding involved. It's very easy to solder. You don't even need a circuit board. For the rest of the gun, we have a Tokyo Marui Mark 23 suppressor with a slightly different end cap to accept 14mm counterclockwise threads. We also have a 3D printed VSR-10 14mm counterclockwise adapter. For inner barrel, we have the old barrel out of the Striker, which is a 550mm 603 type bore, if I remember correctly. And this one's been de-bridged, and we actually have a Maple Leaf MR hot bucking with a 3D printed arm, as well as a 3D printed TDC turret. Haven't had a chance just yet to test the TDC turret. I've tested it without the turret using my thumbnail to push down on the hop arm. However, I don't see why it shouldn't work. And then on the top we have a 3:9 times by 40mm scope, and I've covered this in some green scaffer tape because for some reason the rubberized body of this had just completely perished and it was hideous. It was sticky, it was covered in fluff. I think it's time we chrono this, and we're going to use the Tippmann 13 cubic inch bottle with the old style Mancraft regulator with the aforementioned Mancraft 4mm micro airline. And then to chrono it we have some 0.48 because that's going to be the weight I'm going to be using. Now VSRs rely a lot on dual creep when it comes to their velocity, so make sure whenever you're using a VSR that you chrono on the weight that you're going to be using, and then use a calculator or chart to work out what the equivalent is in 0.2s, because this thing here gains like 100 FPS just from dual creep alone. I haven't got any hop pressure right this second as well, so that will also affect the velocity. I haven't got the hop set up right now. There's no point me fiddling with it because I can't adjust it properly. I'm going to load this with 6 rounds because I want to try it with and without the airline. Now if we pull the trigger right now we will dry fire. Now technically this has a very slow sort of semi-automatic trigger, however of course it won't fire a round until you've actually physically chambered it. So we've just done our first 3, and this is with the airline. So we've got 305.9, 306.5, 306.5, so nice and consistent. This is around about 470 FPS on 0.2s. Like I said earlier, once I've got the hop unit adjusted, that will probably increase somewhat. And now we're going to try it straight off the regulator with no airline, although we are seriously running low on air, but I found I was getting about 65-70 shots out of about 800 PSI in the tank. And then if we look for 4, 5 and 6, 332, 333 and 335. Did have a double feed earlier on though, which is just VSR-10 hop units for you. Another reason why I hate them. But 330 odd on a 0.48 is probably knocking on 500 or maybe even slightly over. Speaking of double feeding, I actually pinched the old Striker BB stopper because it's got an Action Army hop unit in it right now, and that seems to have somewhat fixed it. I had a double feed earlier on. It works for the most part. I think maybe I need to put a stiffer spring in the hop unit. But in regards to the Sabre, you heard how quiet that thing is, and I really can't wait to use this with just how quiet it is. Alright, this is with no hop. Ready? Yep. Just drop shy of the barrel. It's so quiet. You can find the plans for the Sabre system for sale on my Colts page. You can find a link in the description and the pinned comment if you want to have a look. I will do different engines for different sniper variants when I get the chance, but I would love to hear what you think about this. If you enjoyed this video, then please make sure you leave a like, and if you want to be part of the channel, then please make sure you subscribe too. And once you've done that, you can check out the other HPA project, the Foverine.